All righty. We are all set here to go, folks. It is time for the National Powersports Dealer Association webinar. Hello, everyone. Good morning to those of you on the West Coast. Happy noon to our mountain friends. And good afternoon to you Midwesterners and East Coasters. I am very proud to say there are 130 of you here, so welcome. I'm Darius Blackford, the Organizational Director of the National Powersports Dealer Association. I know there's two of me here. One is better looking than the other, but actually that's just, that's a glitch in our system. I will explain that in 1 second. Myself and my colleague Tigran Sujikawa welcome you to today's webinar, How to Prepare for 2024. Our panelists today are Jim Woodruff from NPDA partner National Powersport Auctions, Tony Gonzalez from NPDA partner Garage Composites, who's standing in under my name or over my name, and I apologize for that glitch, Tony. You'll do a better job than I will. And Dr. Paul Leinberger from the future. Seriously, he's an expert specializing in consumer trends and corporate strategy. Our moderator is someone many of you know in person, if not through words, Robin Hartfiel, editor of Dealernews. A couple of housekeeping items before we get started. This webinar is being recorded and will be shared by the NPDA after this event. If you have questions, please type them in the chat area and we will do our best to respond. If we run out of time, we will hang on to those questions and get the responses out when we share the recording. Finally, the NPDA is thankful for all the support from our 400 plus members and 25 partners, including, of course, National Powersport Auctions and Jim Woodruff, and Garage Composites and Tony Gonzalez, and of course, Dealernews and Robin Hartfiel. We're also humbled by the work and commitment of our board of directors, all dealer principals from around the country. We do have a couple open seats on our board and are holding an open nomination period until next Friday, December 15th. While we're seeking good candidates, period, we would welcome ones from the Northwest and the Southeast US or California, as well as Southeastern US. Please just send a note to info@npda.org and we will send you an application, or visit our website, www.npda.org. Okay, I'm done. It's now time to turn today's program over to our moderator, who will move us through the program. Robin, the internet is yours.
Thank you, Darius. Thanks everyone for participating, and a special thank you to our esteemed Dr. Paul Leinberger, who has the 30,000-foot view of our industry and the real world, literally as well as physically. He was in Scandinavia yesterday, took the red-eye flight, and made it in just in time for this presentation. So I think we'll kick off with him for a global macroeconomic view of what's going to happen in 2024. Then we'll move down to Jim Woodruff, who is going to take it from 30,000 feet to maybe 10,000 feet, where we see what unit sales are doing, what that's going to mean. And then we'll close it up with Tony Gonzalez, who can give us the boots on the ground dealer's perspective from his 20 groups that they do through Garage Composites. And Dr. Paul, if you can take it away, what's the view like from up there?
Thank you very much, Robin. I guess I'm more at about 80,000 feet, so see if we can get it down to 30,000 feet. Okay, let's start by looking at where we are today. As we end 2023, inflation seems to be under control, and the Federal Reserve's inflation gauge has just dropped to a 2.5-year low. That's adding to bets that the Fed will begin cutting interest rates in the spring of next year. So that's trend number one, and that's your first good news trend. We're expecting lower interest rates in the spring. Right now, they're at 3%. In September, they're at 3.7%. And in June of 2023, it was 4.3. So if we keep going down, that looks like good news starting in the spring. So from an economic standpoint, at least as the Federal Reserve looks at it, things could be pretty good next year. Although next year is going to be, well, let's say complicated. As we move into 2024, there are two themes that would dominate both your time and attention. Number one, rapidly changing technology, and number two, what I call today's confident consumer. All of this, as we'll go into, is happening against a backdrop of very significant challenges, as we all know. Accelerating climate change, growing economic inequality, declining trust is at an all-time low in the United States, increased polarization, and, as I said, an uncertain economic environment going into 2024. First, let's talk about technology. We are now in the beginning of year one of the greatest technological revolution the world's ever seen. Greater, in fact, than the Industrial Revolution. It's really hard to put in perspective, but it really is the case. We are moving into what might be called the digital age. Whether you're talking about AI, chat GPT, large language models, next generation robotics, multimodal foundation models, or quantum computing, all things that many of us knew nothing about, I certainly didn't a year ago, are beginning to dominate the scene. And in 2024, it will affect everyone, your own life, as well as transforming your dealership. We'll talk about that in a moment. Second, the either rider or potential rider coming through your door this next year is probably the most demanding and sophisticated consumer I've seen in watching the consumer for 24 years. Today's consumer is under pressure. 72% say external forces, such as rising prices and climate change, are impacting their lives directly. They're paradoxical, meaning 69% say they admit to behaving inconsistently, but think that paradoxical behavior is both normal and acceptable. So under pressure and paradoxical. Third, they see themselves as ever-changing. 67% say their behavior is changing as a result of the changes in the world around them. And fourth, they're demanding. 60% expect you as a retailer, as a dealer, to address their changing needs and do that in ways that are different than you've done in the past. You cannot be the same dealer you were in 2023 and 2024. And that's demanding issue is growing at the strongest rate I've ever seen. If up from 51% in 2022 and up from 41% in 2021. So under pressure, paradoxical, ever-changing, and demanding. I think the catchword to think about as we go into 2024 is CAVE, C-A-V-E. C, complex, A, ambiguous, and also ands. I'll explain ands in a second. V, volatile, and E, everywhere. Let me explain what I mean. Let's talk about this world of ands I just said. Consumers are both trading down and selectively spurging. That means that they're buying more private labels, and I expect that to continue in next year as well, and looking for discounts, and at the same time splurging on name brands that they can align with and that have their same values. So trading down and selectively splurging. Second, they're shopping everywhere and all at once. This is probably the most important one, and one I call the omni-channel infinity loop. Omni-channel infinity loop. The majority of consumers now use at least 3 channels for every purchase journey. Usually they start online, then they come into your store, then they go back online. They may go online while they're in the store, looking at exactly looking at the product they're interested in purchasing. And then they may very well leave your store and go back home or back to their car and buy off the internet. It's one of the greatest impacts of the pandemic was to take Americans from a place of beginning to use e-commerce and buying through e-commerce and exploding it. So now retail e-commerce will end the year at 19.5%. Now that's it's not nearly as much as many people thought it might be, but that's up almost 10% from pre-pandemic levels, and it'll rise to probably projected to be about 25% by 2025. Where are they using e-commerce? Well, most of them are using their smartphones. 76% are using smartphones for e-commerce, and 69% are using desktop computers, while only 28%, and mostly baby boomers, are using tablets. So omni-channel infinity loop. If you want to connect with your consumers, you've got to have a very strong email presence, and that presence also has to exist in parallel in what you're doing inside your dealership. Third, when it comes to your store, the question is, what matters most to consumers when they walk into your store? There are 6 things that consumers are looking for, your customers, when they walk into your store.
Listen to
After price, after price and quality, the most important thing, can you still hear me? Yes? Okay. After price and quality, the most important thing for consumers is convenience. How convenient are the products you sell from their point of view? Number 2, trust. They need to be able to trust you in a world full of people that are untrustworthy. 3, personal growth. It sounds like an odd one to talk about when it comes to what they want from you in your store. It's very important to them. They want to feel different when they walk out of the store than they did before they went in. 4th, recognition, personalization. They want you to treat them as an individual. If you just treat them as another customer, you're going to find yourself in trouble. 5th, sustainability. This might not seem like the kind of thing that you need to spend much time with, but consumers are saying no. 78% of them will do business with you if you sell products that have a sustainability promise, as well as your own store. And finally, 6, fun. So the top things they want most from you are convenience, trust, personal growth, recognition, sustainability, and fun. Okay, finally, when it comes to technology in your store, expect to be impacted most by AI in 2024. That's going to happen in 2 different ways. Number 1, you probably have already seen and already used suppliers that are using AI. And most probably, and my guess is, the first of the major technology changes that are coming will impact you through customer service. Consumers want tailored messages that meet their needs. They want to be offered targeted promotions. They want you to celebrate their milestones. If they have a birthday or an anniversary, or you know about the time they bought their first bike, they want you to say something about it. They want you to follow up after they've bought from you, so follow up post-purchase. They want you to personally address them, any communications you have with them, and send triggers based on their behavior. So the question is, how do you get all that information? Well, we can talk about that later, but that becomes really important, and AI can help you a lot when it comes to that. So if you wrap that all up, what that means is today's consumers are confident, they're empowered and self-reliant, number 1. Number 2, they're demanding and ever-changing. Number 3, they live in the world that's no longer just physical or digital. They live in a world that's both of those things. And they move back and forth very freely between the two, something we didn't see pre-pandemic. They're coming back to retail. Many of them will be coming back into your stores in a way, of course, they couldn't do during the pandemic, but they're not going to do it at the same frequency. They like being online as well as coming in store, and they want to do both. They want a personalized shopping experience. They're comfortable with technology, and they're looking for sustainable products and to support your sustainable store policies. In the end, what they're looking for is a sense of community, a community that only you can give them, and they would love more fun experiences. So that's where the consumer is today, and you can expect them to be there on tomorrow. So focus on both the consumer themselves and the changes that are taking place in technology. Okay, Robin, back to you.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Paul. And I forgot to mention, we will open this up to questions afterwards, even if we do end up running a little bit long, because that's a lot to take in. Jim, we saw the supply chain snafus block our go-to-market. How do we go to market now, and how do we reach these customers that are going to be emerging from the cave that Dr. Paul just explained to us? What is going on at the wholesale level?
Well, Robin, thinking about what we have coming, I thought I'd start with what we're seeing now and, talk a little bit about some of the drivers and at least what I see coming in 24 for the powersports industry. And obviously we've got a keen insight on what's happening in the wholesale market, which I think is a great read through to what's happening at retail. The first thing is that basically at retail nationwide, using registration data as an indication, this year has seen some slowing. So, overall, the total new and used vehicles sold are down about 6.6% from last year, and down actually about 1.7% from 2019. This is through September. We'll see what the next few months bring. The data is always delayed a little bit, but I don't think the trend's going to change any. It could be even slightly down from what we've seen through September. So not a lot, but it's definitely down a bit. One of the interesting things to me, though, when I was looking into it, was that new unit sales are down 2.3% from last year. However, they're up 13.3% from 2019. Now that might vary a little bit from what we see in retail sales data, et cetera. There are some product categories that are up. There are some product categories that are down, but that's kind of the blended view. Now, on the flip side, when we look at the used side, it's down 9% from last year and down 2.7% from 2019. So new is up from pre-pandemic, used is down from pre-pandemic. They're both down from last year and down more on the used side. Why is that? Well, I think you hit on one of the key things, and that is supply improves significantly on the new side. Dealers have the inventory that they need. They had a backlog that they were able to fulfill. They were selling new units instead of used units. They didn't need to do as much. As a result, the ratio between the two shifted towards new. And I think one of the things looking into 2024 is we'll see that reverse. We'll go back to more normal balance of used and new sales. So, new will feel some pressure, and used will probably be up in comparison. The other thing that we're seeing is on the pricing side at wholesale, we're at the low point of the year. And that's typical for this time of year. Thankfully, this year was a more normal seasonality, shift, if you will, over the months of the year. But we saw this year what I thought we would see, and that is the same kind of significant price decline from the peak that we saw last year. COVID pricing's gone. And in fact, a typical year might swing, just generally speaking, for all the product categories, about 15% from the spring peak in wholesale pricing to the fall low. This year, we're looking at about 25%, so significantly more. And that's down a little bit from last year, which saw about a 35% decline, 30 to 35% decline overall. So still a significant drop, not as much as last year, but the price correction is pretty well set in. Generally speaking, the pricing is at the point now where at wholesale, things are about what they were pre-pandemic. Metric product tends to be about 5 points above on a retained value basis, what we saw pre-pandemic. And then domestic cruisers, particularly one of the large brands there, pretty much back to 2019 levels for similar product. So COVID pricing's gone, and I think this is kind of where we're going to be at. Dealer inventory is up, so that certainly has an impact on pricing and the comfort that dealers feel. Right now, dealers are based upon major franchises, large percentage view that we have of that part of the industry, thanks to the folks that we work with over at CDK, et cetera. We also have some other data sources that we blend into that. But dealers are about 7 months of inventory right now. And that's about double what it was this time of year last year, and up from what we would typically see. So, when we take a look at the market, then what do we think is going to happen? The key drivers are consumer spending, credit availability, time and interest, how much time people have to ride. I think it's one of the nice things we had during COVID is people had time and money and they spent it. General demand for our products, and then pricing has a certain impact on that. Consumer spending really is the biggest one. Employment is at unemployment's at an all-time low. So employment is strong. Consumers have disposable income. It is getting eaten away by inflation. And they have the interest to participate in our sport, which is awesome. Dr. Paul hit on a lot of the key things that drive people to our industry, and I think we've got a lot of opportunity to take advantage of that one. But where are we going with those things, right? We could talk about where it's at. I've got all the data, but where's it going to go? This is my personal prognostication. I do not have an economics degree, so we'll see how it works out. But, I believe that consumers, compared to this year, going into 24, their level of interest in power sports and the time they have available to dedicate to it will remain fairly steady. I think unemployment will be down a little. When you talk about employment or unemployment, the reverse of each other. Employment will be down slightly, so unemployment will rise a bit. But I don't think we're going to see the recession that I thought we would see this year, and that people have been talking about for 2024, although it may be a little bit softer. But I think employment will be a bit of a downward pressure, but not enough to have a significant impact. Disposable income will definitely be down as inflation eats into people's paychecks, et cetera. Credit's going to be tighter and a lot more expensive. We're seeing that now. It's one of the biggest hurdles that dealers are facing in maintaining their sales levels. And, I think demand will be fairly flat. So I think overall volume will probably look new and used together about what we saw here in 2022, plus or minus a point or two. I do expect a shift to go back towards used from new. So we may see a little bit of pressure on the new side in terms of volume, and used may actually go up over this year. We shall see. And I think both wholesale and retail pricing will go down. We are not going to be able to maintain the margins at retail that we've seen definitely during COVID. And I think, in fact, we may see margin compression from what we saw pre-COVID. If I had to make a guess, right, what's 2024 going to look like? What's a good comparable? Every year is different, of course, but I think my best guess would be it's going to look a lot like 2019. And my recollection of 2019 is it wasn't a bad year, but it wasn't a rock star year. There's definitely some pressure that the industry is feeling, wishing that more people were buying bikes, et cetera. And at the end of the year, going into 2020, things really started to take off again. The economy was doing strong. Things were looking really great. And then, of course, the pandemic hit. So I think America is going to look a lot like that, but it's going to feel a lot like, I'm going to say 2007, where we were coming off some highs. 2006 was an awesome year. The recession and some of the things that were happening, the economy hadn't hit yet. 2008 was, still a year away, but we were feeling it. Consumers were feeling it. People were kind of holding back a little bit, but I don't think we're going to tip into a recession yet. I think it's just going to feel worse than it will actually be. So, I think there's a number of strategies that dealers can employ and the industry in general can employ. I'll touch on those briefly, and if people have questions, certainly we can dig into some more things that can be done to work through this. But price pressure is going to be key. That's going to be something that is going to exist both wholesale and retail, and it's a fact. We're going to have to live with lower margins to be able to get product to move. People are going to want to buy it, but they're not going to have the credit, et cetera. Turn times are going to be absolutely critical, and we talk about that quite a bit. It's one of our common themes, but it's really about managing your inventory. Stay lean in 2024. Don't go big. You can always replace a unit. You can't always replace a dollar. So if you're heavy on inventory and it's depreciating rapidly or just depreciating at all, which it will do, and you're having to get rid of it, you're going to take a hit. Keep that in cash instead. Keep the inventory that you're going to need. And if it turns out that the year's better than you thought, cool, go get another unit. Obviously, increase your cash reserve. I don't think that stockpiling cash is going to be necessary if we're not looking at significant recessionary forces, but some extra is probably smart going into 24 with some uncertainty that we're seeing. And with regards to managing inventory, turn floored units faster than non-floored units. And for most dealers, it's probably going to mean emphasis on new versus used. Hate to say that because, you know, we're the primary channel for used, but it's just a reality. If you can turn new units faster, your flooring costs will go down significantly. Your carrying costs won't be as great. And even though the margin may not be quite what you would like it to be to turn new units, you've significantly reduced your cost side of things. The other advantage to turning more quickly, particularly on the used side, is that it allows you to bring in fresh inventory at a lower cost basis. So doing what you can to reduce your cost basis in your inventory is going to be absolutely critical to being able to maintain decent margins going forward. The other thing, of course, is be smart about what you pay, whether it's a trade, an auction unit, whatever source you have for used units. Can't control the new side as much. But you know, the old adage that money is made in the buy is definitely going to be a key part of 2024. So Robin, with that, that's kind of what I see coming and the reasons why.
Thank you very much, Jim. Just to put that in perspective, the RV industry, which was on a similar rise to us, I saw Thor RV declared that they're down 60 points right now as of today from where they were. And that was when they cut back on production and everything else. They knew the bottom was going to drop out. So us being flat as an industry is actually really good news. But that stems to Tony's purview. Tony, did we forget how to sell? Do dealers even know what this means? We've got all these added pressures that the market's not there. How do we go into 2024 and how do we do it better?
Well, you took my first point, Robin, right out of my mouth, and that was it. And some of the things that I'm looking at here is, you know, the doctor started off by saying something that was just super profound, and that is 60% of your customers expect you to change how you operate within your walls, and they want you to continue to evolve with them. They're not looking for you to stay stale in one place. And then, you know, I listened to some of the things that Jim was talking about as far as the supply on that pre-owned side, and he has just really great salient points. That's why we have him on our podcast quarterly, is they just bring so much to the market. So in the spirit of that, you know, in looking through our composite and national norms, you know, the industry has year over year from 22 into the end of 23, we have taken on $1.3 million more, almost $1.4 million more dollars in inventory that is sitting on their floor. We're about 78 plus units year over year. We're a little off as far as unit sales go, but to your point, Robin, you know, we're not sitting there talking about 60 points off of our businesses. Dealers are expecting to sell about 40% less units year over year. One of the more profound things is if we talk about month supply in the dealership space, you know, Jim was really good at painting that pre-owned picture of what's going on out there. If I look at our inventory levels year over year, on-road inventory went from 2.8 month supply to a 4.4 month supply where we sit today. Our biggest players, the ATV space, went from a 3.1 to a 4.4. And then the number one product that we sell in the industry, UTV, went from a 2.4 month supply to a 4.2 month supply. You know, when we talk about kids returning to sports, or as I'm sitting here looking out my window in Steamboat, snow beginning to fly. So, you know, winter is coming, and I'm glad that you teed up that number one point, Robin, because our number one point to dealers right now is you're going to learn how to sell. You have to learn how to sell, because customers are not just going to come in and buy as they did for, you know, a good 2.5 years. We've said this many times on the podcast and in our 20 clubs, is a lot of dealers have very green sales teams that came into the industry under the pretense of customers come in, they look for a color. If you don't have that color, well, then what color do you have? And I'll buy it. And I'll buy it at whatever price that you have, because I know that you're the one with all the cards. A lot of the sales staff either are brand new and don't know how to sell, or quite frankly, they atrophied over 3 years and they just took super easy deals and they sent them on their way with F&I or without F&I, because at those margins, we were doing really well. So our number one point is you have to get back into a culture of training. You have to get back into a culture of being inventive. You have to give your customers a reason to walk into your store. Another salient point that I heard was, your customer is going to go look online. They're going to come into your store. They're going to touch it, feel it, squeeze it. They may leave. They may go back and go get online, whether it's on their phone or through the internet. They may purchase on the internet if you've not given them a really good reason to come back into your store and enjoy your experience. So number one thing we're talking about is get back into a culture of training, get back into a culture of selling, get back to texting, get back to phone calls, get back to emails, get back to really good greets, and get rid of some of this inventory. Number two is we've discussed this many times as well, which is if I gave you the front door, if I gave a salesperson the front door, or I gave your salesperson a CRM, which one would you take? And owners, general managers, and even salespeople will say, I will take the CRM. I'll take the database 6 ways to Sunday before I take the front door, because this is where most of the good fruit is bared, right? So we have to get into the CRM. We have to get into the DMS systems, and we have to start data mining the customers that we already know have spent money in your dealership. Our transactions year over year are down anywhere from about 850 to 1,000 transactions year over year. So less people are coming through the door. And even worse, as a proof of the pudding of Green sales team, is those that are coming in the door are not getting put onto the traffic log or are not getting their dollars and wallets out and putting them through the cash register. So transactions are down, which means we have to, again, create door swings. So get into your CRM, get into your DMS system, whether it's looking at your top 50 customers, whether it's starting with the most recent person that walked through the door that you got information from, whether it's starting in January and working your way down, whether it is trading sales folders. If Jim made all of these calls and Robin made all of those, let's switch and let's see if we can get a different in, and maybe it was me and you need to take a swing at them. So let's use our number one resource that we pay a lot of money for in the dealership. We're paying $2,000, $3,000, $5,000, $6,000 a month to have these computer systems. Use them, and let's contact our customer. Number three, I would say is, watch what you're selling your units for. One of our recent podcasts that Sam and I talked about was, you got 3 types of dealerships right now. You have those that are just not believing that the pandemic is over, and they are looking at their units that they have as gold, and you will look at their margins as being super high. I have some of those dealers in my own 20 club that I moderate, and you got to look at those people and say, listen, it's hard to come out of your mouth, but you need to start looking at taking all the deals or taking some skinnier deals, because most certainly you are walking some of your customers if you're trying to hold all of that margin. Now, I wouldn't be saying that if I didn't give you that month's supply numbers that I did, and the millions more dollars that we have sitting on our floor and the units that we have sitting on our floor. But you got to check your margins and look at, if you're super high on what you're selling your stuff for, or you are at pandemic level margins, you need to back off. And Jim was talking about this in his part that he was talking about, which is you just got to resolute in your head that these things are not as worth as much as they were just 1 year ago. The second thing that we're seeing some dealers that are panicking and racing to the bottom, which is now they're starting to give things away. They're starting to be the discounter. They're starting to live on hopefully finance and insurance and fixed operations. And we're seeing margins that are sub double digits into that 9, 8, 7, and 6. That's also the wrong thing to do, because that's a very easy way. Cash is king. To Jim's point, he said, you can't put a pre-owned unit or a new unit into the bank. You put dollars into the bank, and we need dollars flowing through these businesses to make sure that cash still remains king. So one thing that we don't want to do is look at these things like they're gilded and gold. The other thing that we don't want to do is we don't want to panic, because none of our indicators from our composite are telling us that we need to run for the hills, that we're all going to go out of business. As I've said several times to my dealers, you have this playbook. You just have to reach back into your filing system, dust it off, and play it. I think Jim said, this looks more like a 2007. At Garage Composites, we're saying that it's a really good way to aggregate data starting in 19, maybe 17, 18, 19, average those and look at those. But you don't need to be running for the hills and just give your stuff away. And that leads me to the last thing, which is you want to have that blended margin, blended volume aspect to your dealership, which is we most certainly want to hold margin on some of the best stuff that we have. And if we can replace the customer and not the unit because it's a great unit, well, we're going to hold margin on that. If we have 50 of these things sitting in crates outside in the back, well, then I'm most certainly going to take a skinny deal and hopefully I can hit them in finance and insurance and get them into our fixed operations and keep a customer happy for life. So you still have to have that blended look when you are selling your units or in parts and accessories or in service as well. So the last one would be number 4 that we're talking to dealers about. And, you know, we're always a sales centric company when we talk to our dealers is we will start on the starting line with any other dealer out there, but we believe firmly in selling your way into profitability. Selling your way out of the problem is the best way to do it. That's why number 4 is the last one on my list, which is controlling your expenses. It doesn't make it less than selling, but we really need to understand by looking at our inventory levels in not only major units, but parts and accessories. Look at your expenses and all of your fixed operations, your admin expenses. Look at ways that you can put one more penny into the bank at the end of every day, at the end of every week, at the end of every month, so that we are making sure we're building up that little bit of a war chest. Because, you know, for 2 to 3 years, we weren't really concerned with expenses. We weren't really concerned with pay plans because, again, money was pouring into the top. We had plenty going into the bank after we paid everybody else off. And we need to really take a fresh look at our expenses to make sure that we can make it through this winter. And so we can get to end of February and beginning of March, and we can get into that sales season again. So those are the 4 things that we're talking to with our dealers. Again, I think if I was to leave one lasting statement is you have this playbook, dust it off, run it like you have before. You're very astute at what you do. You know how to change with the environment. You're very malleable in the way that you think and you operate. Just go out there and win the day like you always have.
And for those of us that joined us late, this is not Darius speaking. This is Tony Gonzalez from Garage Composites. We had a little technical snafu with the name placards, but it's Tony, not Darius. So I do have one question for you, and it's probably the third rail before we open it to our audience. Are we going to see channel stuffing by the OEMs? How does a dealer get ready for that?
You're asking me, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, not are we going to? We're already seeing it. You know, I think there were manufacturers that went on record that said, you know, we're done with that volume game. We're done with pushing. We're done with stuffing, and you know, it's a wholesaler on one side and it's a retailer on the other. The wholesaler has to meet their demands. They have to build their stuff. They have to really be accountable to Wall Street, and they have to get rid of it because they sure as hell don't want to carry it either and pay for the juice on it. And we're already seeing it. Like I said, you're talking our numbers, $1.4 million more stuff. We're seeing 75, 80 more units on the floor than there was year over year. Now we're still comparing that to a market that was super down, but I don't believe in any way, shape, or form that we're not going to see a continued push of inventory. And you say, how do we have dealers there to combat that? And or how do we prepare our dealers to meet the OEMs on equal turf? Is you have to do what is right for your business, because you know, one of the best things that Ed Lemko ever said, it's the worst thing that you can do for your community is to go out of business. And, you know, I would rather go look for it than look at it. And if it means that you simply just can't take 20 of these things, I can do 8 because of my forecast, my projections, and what my numbers truly say. Well, then that's what we're going to have to do, because we're going to start to see dealers start to struggle and doors start to close if we continue to just take things to meet all of these algorithms to get some form of a reward point or a trip to Hawaii. Or a lot of people can't follow what these algorithms and programs are, but it's better to work between your ears with what you have right in front of you and your budget and your accountant and know what's in the bank than just take stuff to see if you can get 1% more here, there, or I can get 15 more units in 2024. So yeah, the push has begun, and you got to push back as hard as you can.
So now I've got one more question for you from the audience that says, how's personnel expenses grown on a percentage basis over the last several years? You're talking at 1 or 2 points, or are we looking at a big swing?
I don't have the information right in front of me, so I can't tell you how much it's grown per se. If you want to email me on that one, info@Garage Composites, I'll get you the exact numbers. What we're seeing though is, what I've heard several times in our 20 clubs is the pandemic hits sometime in February, March, April of 2020. Every one of us that's sitting on this webinar panicked. I mean, I had a hard, long talk with my wife of, I'm not sure that we're going to have a business, by the summertime, because I don't know what's going to happen. A lot of people put their staff onto some form of an hourly or salary pay plan because they didn't want them to go hungrier. They didn't want to have them not have some money in their pocket as well. And now we've had that pay plan 20, 21, 22, and through 23, and we just have not reconciled the fact that we either have to take away the hourly and go back to a compensation plan that is based off of performance. So that's what we're starting to see. And again, whoever has that question, info@Garage Composites, I'll get you the exact numbers of how much we've increased.
Awesome. Thank you. Jim,
Yeah.
got a question for you on the percentage of units going through and dollars. What are new and used UTV sales versus motorcycles? Are four wheels still the savior of the dealers as it was pre-pandemic?
Great question, Robin. And I think there's two ways to look at it. One is what's happening out there in the world with registration data, which is a good proxy for what's actually happened for retail sales, new and used. And then we have the wholesale side. Unfortunately, on the registration side, since side-by-sides, et cetera, aren't registered in many states, it's not a reliable number, shall we say. Interestingly, I think side-by-side sales overall, based upon the data we do have held fairly steady. So I don't know if the mix has changed too much, but we definitely have seen the mix shift at wholesale. So when we take a look at the wholesale side of it coming through auction, through most of the pandemic and really until earlier this year, I'd scratch my head and say, well, I know that at retail, particularly for new units and units being financed, that there's close to as many side-by-sides being sold and financed as motorcycles, and yet they're a tenth of the volume compared to motorcycles. So what's up with that? So that's shifted now, and it's not 50-50, but we've definitely seen a large increase on the side-by-side volume coming through auction. A little bit of an increase in repos. Not a whole lot of change on the dealer consignment side. Dealers are more likely to consign or liquidate through the auction process motorcycle or an ATV, et cetera, than they are side-by-side, although we do very well with those. But the biggest change has been in fleet liquidations. So we don't really have it so much in the motorcycle side, but with some of the rental programs, adventure programs, other types of things that have gone on in the industry over the last few years, those turns of that inventory basically came to a halt during the pandemic because the manufacturers didn't have new inventory to replace it. And if they had new inventory, it went to the dealers for retail. That problem's gone. The inventory's there. So a lot of those fleets that have aged over the last 2-3 years or so have gotten refreshed, and that volume's coming through. So I think it will continue to grow in terms of the proportion of side-by-sides. The fleet stuff will probably decline a little bit as that gets liquidated and returned to more normal cadence. But I do think that the repo piece is going to pick up. And I didn't talk about that earlier, but I do think that we will see a moderate increase in repo volume as we go into 2024.
Thank you very much. I do have a question specifically for Tony, but I think everyone on the group should chime in on this one. I'm now texting my dealer GM on all sorts of topics, including sales and special events. Is quote unquote texting the next big change in the way dealers do business? How do we learn about this, and how can we implement texting to our customers? So Tony,
I've been saying this for years is, we in sales floors all around the country in the morning, you have sales managers saying, now get over there and make your 5, 10, 15 calls today. And I put forth that's at 10 o'clock in the morning when most people are at work or doing something, right? And so, it's funny, we were doing a state of the industry about 3 or 4 years back, and and my business partner Sam was presenting, and I texted everybody that was in the room from our texting platform that we use, which is Connect for Garage Composites. And I just asked them, please respond if you got this. And as Sam is talking up in front of the projector there, I'm starting to get all kinds of text back into me. Got it. I got your text. I got your text. So my point to them was, I got about 70% of the room to text me back while you were actually in a business meeting, while somebody was giving a presentation to you. And I said, how many of you would have actually taken a phone call in the room, just picked up the phone and said hello, and none of them raised their hands? I said, that's the point, is for the most part, we're not talking on the phone. If we're not talking to, my wife, my children, my mother, and good friends, maybe, that call at a very convenient hour, but I am not taking calls from numbers that I don't know. But I will very much so look at my phone, and I will see that it's, Bob Smith from ABC Motorsports, and curious to know if you want us to come and get your motorcycle so that we can get it winterized and stored. I can answer that in a million different formats in a bunch of different places. So if you are not actively using a texting system, and there's a lot of them attached to your DMS system, and there's several third-party vendors out there that can get you into this, you're honestly missing a massive part of how people communicate, that is the number one form of communication, is through this thing right here via text messages. So yes, most certainly you got to be into using text for the service department, for the parts department, for the sales department. That is the best way to communicate with anybody right now.
And Dr. Leinberger, you're on that cutting edge of communications. What comes next after texting? We've got a couple questions spinning off on that. What is the current technology for consumers, and how do we access that successfully within our industry?
Well, I think, Robin, that I'd reinforce both what Jim had to say as well as what Tony had to say, and the issue around using your DMS. This issue of personalization and this demanding customer that we now have that we didn't have before. The number one thing is, listen, you cannot run the dealership the way you want to run your dealership. You have to run it the way they want you to run it, which means you need to understand the consumer and where the consumer is going. And one of the most surprising things to me coming out of the pandemic is how comfortable consumers have become when it comes to technology. And texting is one of the ways, as Tony was talking about, that consumers are doing this more and more. And what you have to do in terms of customer service is to make sure that you understand who these people are, and to be proactively going out to them. That 10 a.m. call, the text, is an absolutely good thing to do. Personalize. You need to know, you can get all the data you need, but you've got to ask for it. Somehow you've got to understand who your customers are, what their age is, what their history is with you in terms of buying and rebuying. Two of the pieces of data that stood out to me as I was looking at this issue of customer service, as it relates to the dealership, is that 78, if you do those kinds of things, the kinds of things Tony's been talking about, 78% of those customers you have will recommend your dealership to others. That's a big number. And 92%, an extraordinary 92%, will repurchase from you and visit your store and go online to look at what you're doing. But you've got to be proactive. If you just sit there and wait for somebody to walk through the door, you are not going to see yourself growing. You're going to be seeing yourself shrinking and maybe going out of business. That's the big change in the way consumers are behaving.
So we can just take a geofence map. It'll take that customer, and then our chat GTP will take over the relationship with the customer and text them everything they need to know. Somehow the humans have been taken out of this equation.
Well, I mean, that is one of the issues. If you don't do a good job at sort of at personalizing it and building a strong human relationship. Yes, the technology that's coming, whether it's chat, CPT, or just artificial intelligence, they'll do it for you. I hope everybody that's been on this call today are using either artificial intelligence already or chat CPT, because there's over 100 million users in the United States, 100 million users in the United States using chat CPT. So if you're not doing a good job in providing the human element to it, the new technologies that are coming so fast will take over.
That's scary, but it's also a world of opportunity, and that's where we can humanize it at the dealer level and build those relationships and build our entire industry's future. Jim, I got one for you back on the numbers, specifically a forecast for Harley-Davidson in terms of dealer inventory, used and new, sales, the sales mix that would be appropriate, and a pricing matrix, and also any anticipated sales you see for the year.
I will do my best to answer that easily. We could probably spend an hour on that. So a lot of things in there, but generally speaking, the Harley-Davidson product, based upon registration data, so it's all, publicly available information. What we see is for volumes at let's call it retail, what consumers are doing with the things that they're purchasing. The Harley-Davidson volumes did fall more than the market as a whole. The information that I have at a high level is that new and used sales combined fell about 11, almost 12% in 22, and they're down almost 3% from 2019. One of the things that's interesting is that it's the opposite of the new and used mix when you break it down that we saw overall for the industry, and that is that new unit sales or registrations fell more both compared to last year and 2019 than used. So I thought that was kind of an interesting dynamic. Now, I think something that we need to keep in mind for all this data is that supply and availability has a huge impact on what's actually happening. In other words, we could say, hey, new sales are down. Man, no one's buying them. Well, that's not necessarily the case, right? I wouldn't say that. I would say that the dealers probably didn't have what they needed. They didn't have enough inventory, didn't have the right product mix, whatever the case may be. And I think that has been, perhaps some strategy we've been seeing to, drive scarcity into that market, which has definitely helped margins. There's a positive side to it. So on a volume basis, that's kind of what we've seen. I think looking into 24, I don't see that changing a whole lot. I think that the domestic cruiser market, Harley-Davidsons, et cetera, will probably follow a similar trend to the rest of the market, which is about the same as this year, plus or minus a little bit. And I also don't think we'll see quite the shift in new to used that we're going to see in the rest of the industry, because it's not in the same situation, right? New hasn't outpaced used sales to give us a point to return to. On a pricing basis, as I mentioned earlier, at wholesale overall, things have declined to within 5% of 2019 levels. So we're almost back to pre-pandemic. For Harley-Davidson product at wholesale, it's basically at pre-pandemic levels. So, I think that's where we're going to be. Just kind of like on the volume basis, I think that's where it's at. I don't see it going down a whole lot more going into 2024. And I think that, the market as a whole and Harley-Davidson product is part of that, will follow a much more normal seasonality curve and probably won't see the big decline, larger than normal decline from the peak to the valley next year that we saw in the last couple of years.
Tony, got one for you or for anyone else on the group, but I found that I didn't know how to run my business until I joined an advisory group, quote unquote, a 20 club. Besides reading trade magazines and watching educational videos and anything else, what can I do in terms of training, especially given the lack or Harley-Davidson's cutting the bulk of their online training and all their in-person training too?
Yeah, listen, I mean, if you can't consume training in manners through the OEMs, the fact is I think we take it too far, meaning you have to get crazy in depth or you have to get super 4,000 level advanced. You just need to get with your people on a daily basis And this doesn't have to be an hour before the doors open. I mean, at some point you most certainly want to take once a week to do an hour, but if it's 8 to 10 minutes, and this is not just for the major sales unit department, this is not just for actual units. This is the number one place it's needed most is in the parts and accessories, motor clothes, pro shop. That's where you need to focus a lot of training, and in the service department with your service advisors and processes. But how do you do it is, listen, at the end of the day, if you don't know anything about training, you're going to have to hire somebody to come in, or you're going to have to get into some form of an LMS system. But I mean, for the most part, I think a good sales manager should know a sales process from top to bottom, and it's just small, manageable, bite-sized pieces on a daily basis. And you got to make it professional, meaning it needs to be on a schedule so that your people can see it. This is what we're going to be doing for the month of December on Tuesday through Saturday. And you also got to get your people involved in helping train as well. So it's not just always the manager, the general manager doing it. You know, give one of your salespeople that is really good at penciling at the desk, have them set up a training, pump up their tires a little bit and say, I'm going to get with you for 20 minutes and you're going to teach the team how you do it. So it's just back to basics. It's super small, bite-sized pieces, and don't overthink it, and don't try and be so professional about it.
I will throw in a commentary for our host, National Powersport Dealer Association. They are going to roll out a learning management system. They are your peers. They are a resource to our entire industry. NPDA.org will take care of you if you still have problems with this. They can make recommendations, and eventually the goal is for the association to provide a very robust training component and also a recommendation or referral to deeper dives with the 20 clubs or other things that you might need. So make sure that we all say thank you to our host. If you're a dealer and you're not a member of NPDA, go to the website, talk to any of the board of directors members. Their faces, their phone numbers, contacts is all there, and they will tell you what it's meant for their store, why they do it, because it is very time consuming. It is a labor of love, but they see the value in all of us. A rising tide is going to float all boats. So we got enough headwinds to face. Let's have some positive news and let's pull together. We're almost butting up against the head of the hour. So I would like just one last comment from each of our panelists. I'll start with you, Dr. Leinberger. You told me when we were having our summit meeting with Dealernews, and I said the sky was falling, and you said the sky is not falling. We're not managing our expectations properly. We're not being proactive about what we can do about it. But you said start with 2019 as a baseline. Are we better or worse than we were then? The pandemic doesn't count. That was an artificial bubble. Where are we today compared to where we were in 2019? So if you could elaborate on that a little bit.
Well, I think Jim has done a great job of explaining exactly where I think things are. I think next year, from an economic standpoint, probably is going to be better. I don't think we're going to have to worry about inflation. Like I said at the top of my presentation, the Federal Reserve feels like spring of next year is going to be pretty good. They're expecting things. While prices may continue to go up, they're going to go up at a slower pace than we've seen in the past, and secondarily, there probably will not be the kind of inflation that we've seen in the past, which means consumers will have money in their pocket and they're willing to spend it. The big issue is whether or not you can meet their needs as opposed to the other way around. So I think all in all, 2024 should be a very good year.
And Jim, if you can elaborate a little bit on that. In September of 2019, and then again in 2020, you and I had talked in November of 2020 about preparing for the quote unquote soft landing. But you even back then were saying you can't make more cash. NPA will always generate more units for you. So let's just get that point reiterated one more time, please.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Rob. And yeah, I think the adage that I used earlier was you can always replace a unit. You can't always replace a dollar. Dollars are scarce, and when you need them, you just can't go make it happen. But I think my takeaway would be that 24 is looking like, to what Dr. Paul was saying, looking like it's going to be a decent year, but it may not feel like it. I was thinking 2019 might be how it actually turns out from the data. We will see, but it's going to feel like 2007 where things, how could it be, right? It should be worse than it is. I don't believe it. That's kind of how this year has been. So I'm optimistic about it. Certainly things could change, but based upon what we see today, I think Dr. Paul's right on the money, and 2024 is going to be okay.
And Tony, convey that message to your 20 group dealers and every dealer you talk to. Are we really okay? And what can we do is the one key takeaway to make our businesses better at the dealer level?
We really are okay. We have dealers right now that are in different parts of this country, in different markets and different demographics and different brands that are succeeding and putting a lot of money to the bottom line, still in double digits at the bottom line net operating profit. So it's not that they're not participating in what's going on around the industry. It's that they are doubling down, working hard, working their leads, making sure that door swings. Texting, phone calls, and emails creates leads, create door openings for your people. You're going to have to get a whole lot more proactive. And again, I remind any dealer that will listen is that if you keep comparing yourself to the pandemic, you're just going to really screw your head up. You're really scrambling your brain. 2019 was just not shaping up to be a good year in the power sports industry. We were down. It was super hard on margins. There was lots of inventory. And then we got this injection that everybody knew was going to end. It had to end. It's just history tells us this had to end. And we're entering into a new market, which I love how, Jim, that you explained that, which is, it's going to be fine. It's just not maybe going to feel fine because you're going to have to work your ass off. You're going to have to get super proactive and grind it out again to make your dollars, which you always have done because we've always had a really robust power sports industry in this country and in Canada, and we will continue to do that.
Awesome. Now, the real Darius, can you come on and replace the fake Darius here and put a bow on this for us?
Yes, sir. Thank you so much. First, again, Tony, thank you for representing me so well. I sounded very intelligent. So everyone, all of our panelists, thank you so much for attending and being part of this today. We're going to send them your emails we're going to send your email addresses to the entire group so they can reach out individually with questions. Again, we're going to share this recording in our newsletter, the NPDA newsletter, which comes out on Tuesday. And we're going to just continue to work to educate with a series of webinars. We have another webinar next week on power sports and electric. We've got 2 planned in January, so stick with us. But again, thank you, Dr. Paul Leinberger. Thank you, Jim Woodruff. Thank you again, Tony Gonzalez. You all did such a great job. We had, again, 140 total signups for today, which in the webinar world is pretty darn good. So, Robin, you did a wonderful job of corralling everything. And thanks for all the support to everybody here today.
Thank you, Darius, and thanks to the NPDA for putting it on. Appreciate the dedication.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This concludes our event, everyone. Have a great rest of your day and a great week. And here comes 2024. Get ready.